Shit, I don't care what you say. You don't fit the profile of this neighborhood. Start talking or this gets much worse for you.
You are ignoring the facts because of how I look.
I am the owner. My ID is right there. Look at the gate sensor.
I've dealt with your type before. You're not going anywhere.
Then open your eyes. Stop.
That agonizing scream belongs to Elijah Vance. Sergeant Miller looked at the hoodie, the neon shorts, and the Crocs and saw a homeless trespasser. He didn't realize he was brutalizing the billionaire CEO of Nebula AI inside the gates of his own $25 million estate. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a catastrophic abuse of power. Because of what happened in the next 10 minutes, the city of San Jose was forced to pay a historic $18 million settlement. And Sergeant Miller, he isn't patrolling the streets anymore. He's serving a crushing 12-year sentence in federal prison. But how did a quiet evening of gardening explode into a national scandal? Before we continue, let me know in the comments where you're watching from right now. Whether you're in the US, the UK, Canada, Africa, or anywhere else in the world, I want to hear from you. And if you're new, please take a second to hit that subscribe button. It helps the channel grow and allows us to keep bringing you stories like this. Now, let's get back to what happened. To understand the magnitude of this mistake, you first need to understand the man behind the hoodie. In the exclusive enclave of Silver Creek Valley, San Jose, wealth usually screams. It looks like Italian sports cars, bespoke Italian suits, and gold watches. But Elijah Eli Vance was different. He was the quiet storm. At 32 years old, Eli wasn't just wealthy, he was a titan of industry. As the founder of Nebula AI, his code was currently protecting everything from hospital databases to the Pentagon's communication networks. He was a visionary whose mind was valued at billions of dollars, a man who had dinner with senators and tech moguls. To the tech world, he was a god. But to the outside world, and specifically to a prejudiced eye, he was invisible. On this particular Tuesday evening, Eli looked nothing like a corporate powerhouse. He was decompressing after a 70-hour work week. He was dressed in the unofficial uniform of the Ultra Genius Coder, a faded, oversized charcoal gray Yeezy hoodie that looked 2 sizes too big, and a pair of obnoxious neon green basketball shorts. On his feet were white Crocs, caked in mud and grass clippings because he preferred tending to his own rare bonsai collection rather than hiring a gardener. He wasn't wearing a Rolex. He was wearing noise-canceling AirPods Max, lost in an audiobook. If you saw him walking down the street in downtown LA, you might mistake him for a drifter or a struggling artist. But here, standing on the manicured lawn of a $25 million smart mansion, that attire should have signaled eccentric owner, not criminal threat. Eli was a man who commanded respect without ever raising his voice. He was known for his calm demeanor and his fierce intellect. He didn't need to flaunt his status because his name alone opened doors that were locked to everyone else. But Sergeant Miller didn't see the genius. He didn't see the philanthropist who had donated millions to local schools. He saw a black man in a hoodie, standing in a zip code where he decided he didn't belong. Miller was about to poke a sleeping dragon, completely unaware that the man in the dirty Crocs possessed the power to end his career with a single phone call. The trap was set, not by malice, but by the sheer blinding ignorance of authority. The sun had just dipped below the hills of Silver Creek Valley, casting long, distorted shadows across the manicured lawns. It was 7:15 p.m., that dangerous time of day when visibility drops and assumptions rise. Eli Vance was standing near the massive wrought iron gates of his estate, fiddling with a malfunctioning biometric sensor. He still had his AirPods Max on, humming along to a podcast, completely in his own world. That was when the silence was shattered by the heavy crunch of tires on gravel. A patrol car, sleek and predatory, slowed to a crawl. Inside was Sergeant Miller. Through his dark Oakley sunglasses, which he wore even as the light faded, Miller didn't see a homeowner fixing his property. He saw a threat. He saw a black man in a baggy hoodie and neon shorts, loitering in a neighborhood where the average home cost $10 million. In Miller's prejudiced mind, the math didn't add up. Someone looking like Eli couldn't possibly belong here unless they were stealing something. Miller didn't offer a polite wave. He didn't roll down the window to ask if everything was okay. He slammed his door open and marched up the driveway, his hand already resting on his holster. The sound of his tactical boots striking the pavement was heavy, deliberate, and aggressive. "Hey, you, step away from the gate," Miller barked, his voice echoing off the stone walls. Eli paused. He slowly slid his headphones down to his neck, turning to face the officer with a look of mild annoyance rather than fear. He knew exactly what this was. He had been stopped in his own car before. He had been followed in department stores. But this was different. This was his home. "Is there a problem, officer?" Eli asked, his voice calm, steady, and dangerously polite. "I said step away from the gate," Miller commanded, closing the distance, invading Eli's personal space. "We've had reports of prowlers in the area. Let me see some ID. Now. This was the moment. The fork in the road. Eli had his wallet in his back pocket. He could have produced his ID, showed the address, and ended the encounter in 30 seconds. But he looked at Miller's sneer. He saw the contempt in the officer's eyes, the absolute certainty that Eli was a criminal. A cold resolve settled in Eli's chest. He decided right then and there not to make it easy. He wanted to see if Miller respected the law, or just his own power. Eli crossed his arms, standing his ground in his dirty Crocs. I don't need to show you ID, Eli stated firmly. I am on private property and I haven't committed a crime. Unless you can articulate a reasonable suspicion, I suggest you get back in your car. It was a test, a trap set for a bully. And Sergeant Miller, blinded by his own bias, walked right into it. He didn't hear a citizen asserting his rights. He heard a challenge to his authority. And for a man like Miller, that was unforgivable. Why is it that when a citizen knows the law better than the enforcer, it's viewed as an act of aggression? The atmosphere shifted from tense to volatile in the blink of an eye. Sergeant Miller's patience didn't just run out. It shattered. Instead of respecting the clear legal boundary of the property line, he unlatched his baton with a sharp metallic click that echoed like a gunshot in the quiet cul-de-sac. I'm done asking, Miller growled, his face twisting into a mask of pure aggression. Without a warrant, without probable cause, and in direct violation of the Fourth Amendment, Miller kicked open the side gate. He stormed onto the private driveway, closing the distance between him and Eli with predatory speed. This was no longer a police inquiry. It was a home invasion wearing a badge. Eli stood frozen, his hands visible, palms open, the universal sign of surrender. But for Miller, surrender wasn't enough. He wanted submission. He lunged forward, grabbing the fabric of Eli's vintage Yeezy hoodie and slamming the tech mogul backward against the rough stucco pillar of his own front gate. The impact knocked the wind out of Eli, dislodging his glasses, leaving him squinting and vulnerable. You listen to me, you little punk, Miller spat, his face inches from Eli's, the smell of stale coffee and aggression overwhelming the fresh evening air. I know exactly what you are. You're scouting, looking for a window to smash, right? You think just because these folks are at work, you can creep around in your trashy clothes and help yourself? This is my property, Eli gasped, trying to maintain his composure despite the adrenaline dumping into his system. Check the land registry. My name is Elijah Vance. Shut up, Miller roared. He spun Eli around, twisting his arm behind his back with agonizing force, applying a joint lock designed to inflict maximum pain. He began a rough, illegal search of Eli's pockets. Stop resisting. Where's the dope? I know you've got something on you. Guys like you always do. It was a barrage of humiliation. Miller's hands rifled through the pockets of the neon shorts, tossing Eli's wallet onto the ground without even looking at the ID inside. He found the sleek iPhone 15 Pro Max in Eli's other pocket. You recording this? Miller sneered. Not today. He threw the phone onto the gravel, the screen shattering on impact. You don't get to record me while you're committing a felony. What Miller didn't know, what his arrogance wouldn't let him see, was that he was performing on a stage. He had forgotten where he was. He was standing in the entrance of the Nebula Estate, a fortress of technology designed by the world's leading cybersecurity expert. High above them, concealed within the sleek architectural lines of the gate and hidden inside the innocuous landscape lighting, 5 separate 8K resolution cameras were silently rolling. They weren't just recording video, they were capturing high-fidelity audio, logging biometric stress levels, and time-stamping every single civil rights violation. The House was watching. The AI system had already flagged Miller as a hostile intruder and was currently uploading the footage in real time to 3 separate cloud servers. Miller thought he was crushing a nobody in a dark corner of the world. In reality, he was starring in his own career-ending movie, recorded in crystal clear, high definition. He continued his verbal assault, calling Eli a hood rat and a stain on the neighborhood, completely unaware that he was digging his own grave with every hateful syllable. But then, the violence peaked. When Eli tried to shift his weight to relieve the pressure on his twisted shoulder, Miller panicked. He stepped back, drew the yellow taser from his chest rig, and leveled it at the billionaire's chest. That's it. Ride the lightning. The air crackled. The prong fired. And the nightmare truly began. Does it make your blood boil to see someone sworn to protect and serve act like a thug with a badge? The silence that followed the taser shot was broken not by a siren, but by a shriek. What on earth do you think you are doing? The voice cracked like a whip across the driveway. Officer Miller, still surging with adrenaline, looked up from where he was kneeling on Eli's back. Rushing toward them was Beatrice Thorne, the 65-year-old matriarch of the neighborhood, still in her pristine white tennis whites, clutching her poodle like a weapon. Behind her was Mr. Davis, the district's most ruthless corporate litigator. Miller sneered, assuming he had allies. "Stay back, ma'am. I've apprehended a suspect. Caught him trespassing and resisting." "Trespassing?" Beatrice screamed, her face turning a furious shade of red. She didn't stop at the police tape. She walked right up to Miller, pointing a manicured finger in his face. "You absolute moron. You are assaulting the chairman of the Homeowners Association." Miller froze. His hands, which were busy tightening the handcuffs around Eli's wrists, stopped cold. The words didn't compute. What? "That is Elijah Vance," Mr. Davis boomed, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 courtroom victories. "He owns this property. He owns the property next door. He probably owns the software running in your patrol car." The color didn't just fade from Sergeant Miller's face. It vanished. He looked down at the man beneath him. He looked at the dirty hoodie, the neon shorts, the Crocs. And then, for the first time, he looked past the clothes. He saw the expensive landscaping. He saw the terrified but furious look in Eli's eyes, not the look of a criminal caught in the act, but the look of a powerful man whose patience had just been executed. Eli, wincing in pain, turned his head to the side. He didn't scream. He didn't beg. He simply spoke a command, his voice raspy but clear. "Nebula, emergency protocol, witness." The house suddenly came alive. A robotic yet pleasant female voice boomed from hidden outdoor speakers, echoing through the entire cul-de-sac. "Voice print confirmed. Elijah Vance. Owner identified. Emergency protocol activated. All exterior lights set to maximum. Police dispatch notified of unauthorized aggression. Recording uploaded to secure server." The entire estate flooded with blinding white security lights, illuminating Miller like a spotlight on a stage. The darkness he had used to hide his brutality was gone. He was exposed. Miller scrambled backward, tripping over his own boots. His hands shook uncontrollably as he reached for his radio, but he couldn't find the button. He looked at Beatrice, who was now filming him with her phone. He looked at Mr. Davis, who was already on a call, loudly saying the words "federal lawsuit" and "police chief." The arrogance evaporated. The bully was gone, replaced by a terrified man who suddenly realized the scale of his mistake. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He looked at Eli's wrists, still in cuffs, and made a pathetic, fumbling motion to reach for his keys to unlock them. "Don't touch me," Eli said. He stood up slowly, shaky but standing tall. He didn't need to fight back physically. The look he gave Miller was heavier than any punch. It was a look of pure, unadulterated pity mixed with destruction. Miller took a step back, his lip trembling, knowing that his career, his pension, and his freedom were dissolving in real time. There is a special kind of feeling when you see a bully realize they picked a fight with the wrong person. Do you feel satisfied seeing this shift in power? Because for Miller, the nightmare was just beginning. The flashing lights approaching in the distance weren't his backup. They were his end. The San Jose Police Department initially tried to control the narrative. In a hastily released press statement just hours after the incident, they described the encounter as a routine patrol stop that escalated due to non-compliance. They tried to paint Elijah Vance as uncooperative, relying on the standard playbook that had protected officers like Sergeant Miller for 15 years. They counted on the public's doubt. They counted on the blue wall of silence. But they forgot who they were dealing with. Elijah didn't wait for the local news to pick up the police blotter. Before the sun had even risen the next morning, his legal team had released the raw, unedited 4K video and audio files from the Nebula Estate's security system directly to the internet. The footage didn't just go viral. It detonated. Millions of viewers watched in 8K resolution as Miller verbally abused a calm, compliant homeowner. The high-fidelity microphones picked up every slur, every threat, and most damningly, the sound of the taser deploying, while Elijah's hands were clearly visible and empty. The police report, which claimed Elijah had reached for his waistband in a threatening manner, was instantly exposed as a criminal fabrication. The public outcry was so deafening that the Department of Justice bypassed the local Internal Affairs Division entirely. 2 days later, the FBI Civil Rights Division arrived at the precinct. They weren't just there for Miller, they were there to audit the entire patrol sector. When federal agents seized Miller's dashcam and bodycam servers, they didn't just find evidence of one bad night. They found a decade of systematic predation. Miller wasn't just a bad apple, he was a hunter. The FBI analysis revealed a chilling pattern buried in the data. Over his 15-year career, Sergeant Miller had logged over 400 suspicious person stops in Silver Creek Valley. Statistical analysis showed that while the neighborhood was 90% white, 85% of Miller's stops involved Black or Hispanic drivers. But the investigation went deeper than statistics. As the FBI began to reopen Miller's old cases, the ghosts of his past victims began to step forward. There was Marcus Thompson, a young architect who had been pulled over by Miller 3 years prior for a wide turn. Miller had planted a small bag of narcotics in his passenger seat. Thompson lost his job, his license, and his reputation. He had pleaded guilty just to avoid jail time, crushed by a system he couldn't fight. Then there was Dr. Sarah Jenkins, a pediatrician. Miller had detained her for erratic driving while she was rushing to the hospital for an emergency surgery. He held her on the side of the road for 45 minutes, mocking her credentials, causing her to miss the procedure. When she filed a complaint, it was dismissed by the very sergeant who was now Miller's union representative. The FBI discovered that Miller used a specific technique known as ghosting. He would turn off his body cam during the most violent parts of an arrest, claiming a technical malfunction. But he made a fatal error with Elijah Vance. He forgot that in a world of smart homes and surveillance, the police aren't the only ones watching. The investigation expanded into a RICO case against the specific unit Miller led. Text messages recovered from Miller's personal phone revealed a group chat named The Gatekeepers, where officers shared photos of minority drivers they had harassed, treating civil rights violations like a sport. They bragged about cleaning up the neighborhood and shared tips on how to write reports that would stand up in court. This was no longer about one billionaire in a hoodie. Elijah Vance had inadvertently pulled the thread that unraveled an entire tapestry of corruption. The evidence was overwhelming, documenting a conspiracy to deprive citizens of their civil rights under the color of law. The badge, which was supposed to be a shield for the community, had been weaponized as a sword against it, and now the federal government was ready to bring the hammer down. The federal courthouse in San Jose was silent as Judge Eleanor Sterling read the verdict. This wasn't just a local disciplinary hearing, it was a federal reckoning. Sergeant Miller stood at the defense table, but he looked nothing like the arrogant predator who had terrorized Silver Creek Valley. Stripped of his uniform, his badge, and his sunglasses, he looked small. He wore an ill-fitting gray suit, his shoulders slumped, his face pale and gaunt from months of house arrest. Across the aisle, Elijah Vance sat quietly, impeccably dressed in a bespoke Tom Ford suit, the very image of the dignity Miller had tried to strip away. He didn't look angry, he looked patient. Judge Sterling didn't mince words. She looked over her spectacles at the disgraced officer and delivered a statement that would be quoted in law schools for decades. "Mr. Miller," she began, her voice echoing off the mahogany walls, "you used the authority of the state not as a shield for the innocent, but as a weapon for your own prejudice. You mistook a citizen's rights for resistance, and you mistook your badge for a crown. Today, that crown falls." The gavel came down with a finality that shook the room. For the charges of deprivation of rights under color of law, aggravated assault, and falsifying police reports, Miller was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Because these were federal charges, there would be no early parole. He would serve every single day of his sentence. But the punishment didn't stop at prison time. In a separate civil settlement, the city of San Jose agreed to pay Elijah Vance a record-breaking $18 million, one of the largest payouts for a single police misconduct case in California history. The city council knew that if they took this to a jury, the verdict could have bankrupted the department. The most satisfying moment, however, wasn't the reading of the sentence. It was what happened next. 2 U.S. Marshals stepped forward. They didn't treat Miller with the professional courtesy cops often show each other. They instructed him to place his hands behind his back. The metallic click-click of the handcuffs, the same sound Miller had inflicted on hundreds of innocent people, echoed through the silent courtroom. As he was led out the side door, shuffling in shackles, Miller glanced back at the gallery. He didn't see support. He saw the faces of the victims he had ghosted over the years, sitting in the front row, finally watching their tormentor disappear into the system he used to control. Elijah didn't smile. He simply nodded, stood up, and walked out the front door into the blinding flash of paparazzi cameras. Justice hadn't just been served, it had been televised. Elijah Vance walked away with a historic settlement, but the scars of that night remain. His victory sends a chilling message through the halls of power. The era of unchecked authority is crumbling. Sergeant Miller made a fatal calculation. He believed that a badge granted him immunity and that a hoodie defined a man's worth. He thought he was the predator, only to realize too late that he had walked into the den of a lion. But we have to ask the uncomfortable question, what if Elijah wasn't a billionaire? What if there were no 8K cameras, no smart home system, and no high-powered lawyers? Would Miller still be on the streets today, hunting his next victim? This story is a victory, yes, but it is also a warning. In the digital age, the eyes of the world are always watching. Every smartphone is a witness. Every body cam is a jury. To those who hide behind a badge to spread hate, your time is running out. The truth has never been brighter, and the cost of prejudice has never been higher. Elijah donated every cent of that $18 million to start a legal defense fund for those who can't fight back. He turned his trauma into a shield for others. If you believe that justice shouldn't depend on the size of your bank account, smash that like button. It helps us expose the truth. And if you think this story was intense, you haven't seen anything yet. Click the video on your screen right now to see what happened when a corrupt judge tried to sentence an undercover FBI agent in his own courtroom. The look on his face when the handcuffs come out is absolutely priceless. I'll see you there.